The sun had just begun its slow rise over the rugged mountains, casting a soft orange glow across the military base. Birds rarely visited this remote place, but the occasional chirp was drowned out by the distant hum of helicopters and the constant murmur of soldiers going about their early morning routines. It was a quiet moment, but anyone who had spent time in a forward operating base knew that such calm never lasted for long. Tension always lingered in the air, like an invisible fog. Inside the base's medical bay, a woman moved with quiet efficiency. She was a nurse, but not just any nurse. Her eyes, steady and focused, told a story of someone who had seen too much, yet refused to be broken by it. She had arrived at this base only a few weeks ago, a widow carrying grief that weighed heavily on her shoulders. Her husband, also a soldier, had died in combat, and ever since, she had been carrying the pain silently, like a hidden wound. But her grief had not made her weak. If anything, it had sharpened her resolve. She treated each patient with care, every movement precise, and every word calm, as if her presence alone could soothe fear. Across the base, the SEAL Admiral was conducting his inspection. A tall, imposing figure with years of experience etched into the lines of his face. He moved from one operation room to another, asking questions, observing routines, and making notes. This was his element, yet even he could not ignore the underlying tension that had grown over the past few days. Intelligence reports had warned of enemy movements nearby, and every soldier felt the unease creeping into their hearts. The base was ready, but the unknown always carried danger. As the Admiral walked past the medical bay, his eyes briefly caught the nurse tending to a young soldier with a minor injury. There was something unusual about the way she worked. Not just the skill in her hands, but the confidence in her gaze. Most nurses would have hesitated, especially with the reports of potential attacks, but she worked as if nothing could shake her focus. The Admiral noted it silently, curious about this woman who seemed so calm amid the growing tension. He had seen many soldiers under pressure, but this nurse carried a quiet strength that was rare to find. The nurse, on her part, barely noticed the Admiral. Her mind was elsewhere, running through the checklist in her head, ensuring every patient was stable, every instrument sterile, and every procedure ready in case the worst happened. She had learned early in her career that panic was contagious, and one mistake could mean life or death. Her training, combined with the loss she had suffered, had forged a woman who could stay composed even when the world around her was falling apart. Outside, the wind swept across the base, rattling the tents and sending a chill through the soldiers on guard duty. The mountains surrounding the compound loomed like silent sentinels, their peaks shrouded in mist. The base itself was a hive of activity, with soldiers checking weapons, maintaining vehicles, and coordinating missions. Everyone knew the stakes. Every sound, every movement was under scrutiny, because in a place like this, the smallest oversight could have catastrophic consequences. Back in the medical bay, the nurse finished tending to the last of her patients for the morning. She took a brief moment to wipe the sweat from her forehead and glance out the small window at the soldiers training in the distance. A part of her felt a pang of longing, thinking of her husband and the life they had once imagined together. But she pushed the thought aside. There was no room for personal sorrow here. Her duty came first. Every soldier she helped, every life she preserved, was a tribute to the one she had lost. The Admiral, meanwhile, moved through the base, stopping briefly at each key location. He asked questions, nodded at reports, and observed the drills. But his mind kept drifting back to that nurse. There was an undeniable aura about her, a combination of skill, courage, and quiet determination. He made a mental note to speak with her later, to understand more about the woman who had captured his attention with nothing more than her presence and her competence. In the moments before the day fully began, a sense of uneasy anticipation settled over the base. Soldiers went about their routines, but there was an underlying awareness that something was coming. The calm was fragile, like glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. For the nurse, it was just another day of doing her duty, yet instinctively, she felt the tension in the air. Her hands itched to be ready, her mind alert to every possibility. She had survived loss, hardship, and countless challenges, and she knew that survival often depended on being prepared for the unexpected. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the base, the scene seemed almost peaceful. But everyone there, from the newest recruit to the seasoned admiral, could feel the tension in their bones. They did not yet know what was coming, but in the quiet moments before chaos struck, the stage was set for a test of courage, skill, and heart. And somewhere in the medical bay, the widow nurse moved silently among the wounded, unaware that her next few hours would demand everything she had and more. The morning had barely settled over the base when the first warning alarms began to scream. Their shrill sound pierced the calm like a blade, instantly snapping soldiers out of their routines. The distant mountains, which had seemed so quiet just moments ago, now felt menacing, as if they were hiding eyes that watched every movement inside the compound. Every soldier instinctively knew that this was no ordinary drill. The tension that had been lingering finally erupted into chaos. Inside the base, the widow nurse was organizing medical supplies when the alarms went off. Her heart didn't skip a beat. Years of training had taught her to stay calm even in the worst emergencies. She immediately scanned the room, assessing what could be needed in a real combat situation. Her hands moved quickly, grabbing first aid kits, stretchers, and emergency medications. Every action was precise, deliberate, as if she had rehearsed this countless times. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, a flicker of worry passed through her mind. Outside, soldiers scrambled to their positions. Vehicles roared to life, their engines echoing across the base. Weapons were grabbed, radios clicked into action, and commanding officers barked orders with sharp urgency. The base had faced threats before, but nothing as sudden or as organized as this seemed. The SEAL Admiral, who had been inspecting morning routines moments ago, now found himself ducking behind a concrete barricade as the first explosions shattered the outer walls of the compound. Dust and debris filled the air, making visibility nearly impossible. The widow nurse didn't hesitate. She moved swiftly through the chaos, checking on injured soldiers she passed along the way. Some were in shock, frozen by fear, while others had minor injuries from the blast. She spoke softly, giving directions, applying pressure to wounds, and ensuring that every soldier who could move was moving towards safety. Her calm voice cut through the panic like a lifeline, guiding those who were disoriented or terrified. Then she saw him, the SEAL Admiral. He was pinned under a fallen beam, his uniform torn, a small trickle of blood staining his shoulder. Time seemed to slow for a moment as she assessed the situation. The debris was heavy, and the risk was high, but she didn't hesitate. Ignoring the explosions and the falling rubble around her, she moved closer, checking his vitals while formulating a plan to get him out safely. Her training was instinctive, but so was her courage, something that no one could teach. Other soldiers tried to assist, but the chaos was overwhelming. Explosions continued to rock the base, sending plumes of smoke skyward, and every second mattered. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe, and the sound of distant gunfire mixed with the alarms, creating a deafening cacophony. Amidst it all, the widow nurse remained focused, kneeling beside the admiral, reassuring him even as she assessed his injuries. Her hands moved skillfully, stabilizing his shoulder, checking for broken bones, and preparing him for extraction. She knew she had to act fast. Every second that passed increased the risk of another structural collapse. With remarkable strength and determination, she coordinated with nearby soldiers, directing them to lift the beam just enough for her to slide under and help free the admiral. Sweat ran down her face, and dust covered her uniform, but she didn't stop. Every movement was calculated, every action purposeful. The soldiers, inspired by her bravery, followed her lead, their own fear momentarily replaced by the need to act. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the admiral was freed from the rubble. The widow nurse quickly checked him again, ensuring he could breathe and that his injuries were manageable. She then helped him walk toward a safer area, using her strength to support him when his legs faltered. The base was still under attack and danger was all around, but in that moment, the two of them moved as a team, a silent understanding passing between them that they had to survive first. The scene around them was chaotic and terrifying. Fires burned in several places, the sound of collapsing structures echoed like distant thunder, and soldiers shouted over the noise, trying to maintain control. Yet, the presence of the widow nurse brought a strange sense of order to the madness. Her calm under pressure inspired others, reminding them of their training and the reason they were there. Even the SEAL Admiral, a man who had faced countless life-or-death situations, couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at her composure and bravery. As they moved toward a temporary safe zone within the base, the widow nurse continued to treat the wounded soldiers they passed. Her hands were steady, her instructions clear, and her courage unwavering. Each life she saved seemed to strengthen her resolve, pushing her forward despite the chaos. She had lost someone she loved, yet she refused to let fear or grief paralyze her now. In a way, this mission, this act of bravery, was a tribute to her late husband, a demonstration that she could carry on his legacy by saving lives instead of succumbing to despair. By the time they reached relative safety, the initial shock of the attack began to settle, replaced by the grim reality of the damage. Injured soldiers were being triaged, fires were being controlled, and defensive positions were being reinforced. The SEAL Admiral, now stabilized, looked at the widow nurse with a mixture of gratitude and respect. She had not only saved his life but had also become a symbol of hope and resilience for everyone present. In those terrifying moments, amid the smoke, rubble, and chaos, the widow nurse proved that courage was not measured by rank or experience, but by the willingness to act when it mattered most. She had faced danger head-on, not because she wanted glory, but because she understood what it meant to be needed. And in that battlefield, her quiet bravery shone brighter than any weapon or armor, leaving an impression that no one in the base would ever forget. The smoke and dust were thick, making it hard to see, and every step the widow nurse took was dangerous. Pieces of debris fell around her, and the distant sound of gunfire reminded everyone that the attack was far from over. Yet, she moved with purpose, her eyes fixed on the figure pinned under the beam, the SEAL Admiral. He was struggling, groaning in pain, trapped under the heavy wreckage. For most people, this situation would have been terrifying enough to freeze them in place. But the nurse's mind was already working, calculating what she needed to do to save him. She took a deep breath, letting the chaos around her fade for a moment. Training, experience, and sheer willpower guided her actions. First, she checked his injuries quickly but carefully. The beam had trapped his shoulder and partially crushed his leg. There were cuts and bruises from the falling debris, and he was losing blood, though not in critical amounts yet. She knew that time was crucial. Every second that passed increased the risk of further injury or worse. "Hold on, sir. I've got you," she said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the chaos. The Admiral looked at her, disbelief flashing across his face. Soldiers had come to help, but she was the first to reach him and take control of the situation. There was a confidence in her movements that was almost magnetic. Others followed her instructions without hesitation. The first step was to create a small opening so the Admiral could be freed. She directed two nearby soldiers to carefully lift one side of the beam while she worked to slide the Admiral out. Her hands were steady, despite the dust and blood, and she guided his body slowly and safely, ensuring that no sudden movement caused more pain. Every second felt stretched, as if time itself had slowed down for this daring rescue. Once he was partially free, she quickly checked his vital signs again. His breathing was shaky, but he was conscious. She applied pressure to a cut on his arm and supported his injured shoulder with improvised padding from her medical kit. She whispered words of reassurance, not just for his physical comfort but to keep his mind focused and calm. The Admiral, who had faced countless dangerous missions, realized that this nurse possessed a bravery and skill that went beyond ordinary training. As they worked, another explosion shook the base, and a piece of debris fell nearby, narrowly missing them. The nurse didn't flinch. Instead, she shielded the Admiral as best as she could while signaling the soldiers to move him to a safer spot. She knew that getting him out of immediate danger was just the first step. They needed to reach a secure location where he could be treated properly. With coordinated effort, they finally managed to lift the beam enough for her to pull the Admiral free. His weight was significant, and it took all her strength, combined with the soldiers' assistance, to move him. Dust clung to their clothes, and sweat mixed with the grime on their faces, but they didn't stop. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated to avoid causing more harm. Once free, she helped the Admiral stand, supporting him as he struggled to walk. The base was still under attack, and danger surrounded them on all sides, but she maintained her focus. Her calm demeanor was contagious. The soldiers who had been panicked moments ago now moved with renewed determination, inspired by her courage. She led them through the safest route she could find, avoiding unstable structures and fallen debris, her eyes constantly scanning for new threats. During the short moments they had to catch their breath, she assessed his injuries again. She stabilized his shoulder, ensured he could breathe comfortably, and applied more pressure to his bleeding wounds. She moved with speed but without panic, a perfect balance that made her almost unstoppable in that chaos. The Admiral, impressed and grateful, followed her lead, trusting her instincts completely. The nurse's actions weren't just physical. They were psychological as well. Her calm voice, precise instructions, and unwavering focus helped everyone around her stay grounded. Soldiers who had been on the verge of panic now worked together efficiently, carrying the wounded, securing areas, and following her directions. In the middle of what seemed like total chaos, she became the anchor everyone needed. By the time they reached a relatively secure area, her hands were scratched, her uniform torn and covered in dust, but she didn't stop. She continued treating the Admiral and other injured soldiers, making sure no one was left behind. Her bravery had inspired a ripple effect. Soldiers who had felt fear now moved with courage, knowing that if she could face the danger head-on, so could they. The SEAL Admiral looked at her, astonishment and gratitude in his eyes. She had not only saved his life but had done so with incredible composure under the most extreme circumstances. At that moment, he realized that her presence on the base was more than just a coincidence. She was extraordinary, someone whose courage and skill were beyond what most people could imagine. Amidst the dust, smoke, and chaos, the widow nurse proved something powerful. Courage isn't about rank or recognition. It's about stepping forward when lives are on the line, even when fear is all around you. She had faced unimaginable danger, acted decisively, and saved a man whose life mattered not only to the mission but to countless others who relied on him. Her quiet strength shone brighter than any weapon, making her the true hero of that chaotic morning. Even as the explosions faded and the base began to regroup, the impact of her actions lingered. Soldiers who witnessed her bravery would not forget it. The SEAL Admiral, who had seen countless battles and experienced the worst of combat, knew that what she had done was nothing short of extraordinary. She had faced death itself, remained calm under unimaginable pressure, and emerged not just unbroken, but heroic. After the chaos of the attack, the base was slowly settling into a tense silence. Soldiers moved carefully, checking for injuries, repairing damage, and making sure the perimeter was secure. Smoke still lingered in the air, and the acrid smell of dust and burnt metal hung heavily. The immediate danger had passed, but the adrenaline that had surged through everyone's veins was still present, leaving them restless and alert. Amid this uneasy calm, all eyes couldn't help but notice the widow nurse who had saved the SEAL Admiral. The Admiral was sitting on a makeshift stretcher, his shoulder bandaged and his breathing steady, but the look on his face was one of disbelief mixed with deep gratitude. He had seen countless emergencies, yet he had never witnessed such courage and skill in someone who, by all appearances, was just a nurse. The soldiers who had witnessed the rescue were whispering among themselves, clearly impressed, but also a little curious. They had always known that medics were trained to handle emergencies, but this was different. This nurse had acted decisively under extreme pressure, saved a man pinned under debris, and seemed completely unfazed by explosions, smoke, and danger surrounding her. As word spread of her actions, questions began to arise. How had she reacted so quickly? How had she navigated through the chaos without hesitation? And why did she seem to anticipate problems before they even happened? Some soldiers were beginning to suspect that she had more experience than anyone realized. Rumors began quietly circulating. Could she have had special training? Could her presence at the base be part of something more than just standard deployment? The Admiral himself had these questions, though he didn't voice them aloud at first. He studied her closely as she moved among the wounded, efficiently tending to their injuries. Every movement was controlled, deliberate, and confident. There was no panic, no hesitation, just a calm determination that inspired trust. Even minor injuries were treated with precision, and her attention to detail was impeccable. She wasn't just performing her duties. She was operating at a level that seemed almost beyond normal field medicine. Despite his curiosity, the Admiral remained focused on his own recovery. He noticed how her eyes scanned the area constantly, how her ears seemed tuned to the smallest sounds, and how she instinctively positioned herself to protect both herself and the injured around her. It was clear she was not only a skilled medic but also someone trained to handle high-risk situations. The realization unsettled him slightly. He was used to being in command, to having control over situations, yet here was someone who, without orders, had taken the lead and executed a complex rescue flawlessly. Meanwhile, the widow nurse continued her work, unaware or perhaps unconcerned with the growing attention she was receiving. She had learned long ago that heroism didn't require recognition, and that lives mattered more than praise. She moved efficiently from one injured soldier to another, assessing wounds, applying dressings, and giving instructions for evacuation. Every action seemed to flow naturally, almost instinctively, as if she had done this countless times before, which made the whispers and sideways glances from the soldiers even more intense. Among the whispers, a few skeptical officers expressed concern. How could someone who had only recently joined the base display such expertise? Was she hiding something? Her presence suddenly seemed too purposeful, too precise to be merely coincidental. The uncertainty caused tension in the command center. Some questioned whether she should remain near the Admiral or whether further investigation was needed to understand her background. These doubts were not born from disrespect but from the simple logic that extraordinary skill often comes with extraordinary training, which sometimes had classified origins. The Admiral, sensing both the admiration and the suspicion surrounding the nurse, made a quiet observation. He realized that appearances were deceptive, and that sometimes those who seemed ordinary carried extraordinary capabilities beneath the surface. She had already proven herself under fire, but the questions lingered. Who was she really? Where had she trained? And why had she been deployed here now? Even as he considered these questions, he knew one undeniable truth: without her, he might not have survived the morning attack. As the base continued its slow recovery from the chaos, the widow nurse finally paused for a moment, taking stock of the situation. Sweat and dust covered her face, her uniform was torn in places, but there was a quiet resolve in her expression. She had done what needed to be done, and yet, she was aware that eyes were on her, that her actions had caused curiosity and speculation. She didn't flinch or act defensive. Instead, she simply returned to her work, tending to the wounded, because that was her focus, her mission, her way of honoring the life she had lost and the lives she was now protecting. The tension that arose from her actions lingered in the minds of everyone at the base. Soldiers who had seen her rescue the Admiral could not stop talking about it, both in awe and in disbelief. Officers debated quietly in corners, wondering if this woman was part of a larger, secret operation. And the Admiral himself, though safe, couldn't shake the feeling that he had witnessed someone who was far more than they seemed. A person whose courage and skill might hold secrets the base was not yet ready to reveal. In that uneasy aftermath, the widow nurse had done more than save lives. She had disrupted expectations, challenged assumptions, and reminded everyone that heroism sometimes comes from unexpected places. Her presence was both a comfort and a mystery, a combination that inspired admiration, suspicion, and curiosity all at once. No one could deny the truth. In the chaos of the attack, she had been extraordinary. And now, as the base recovered and the soldiers returned to their duties, everyone knew that her actions that morning would be remembered, not just for the lives she saved, but for the questions she left behind. The calm that had slowly settled over the base was shattered once again, but this time, the threat came not from outside the compound. A low hum of engines approached, and shadows moved along the perimeter in a way that made soldiers immediately tense. No one recognized the figures at first, but as they drew closer, it became clear that this was no ordinary reinforcements or backup team. They were clad in black tactical gear, their faces hidden behind masks, moving with a precision that only elite operatives could achieve. The soldiers who had witnessed the morning attack immediately froze, unsure of what to expect. The widow nurse was in the middle of tending to a wounded soldier when she noticed the newcomers. Her instincts sharpened instantly, and she scanned the team with careful, alert eyes. She knew instinctively that these people were not there for a regular medical or combat mission. The tension in her chest grew, but she didn't panic. Years of training had taught her to assess situations quickly, and she did just that, noting their approach, the speed of their movements, and the subtle signals between them. Everything about this team suggested one thing: extraction. The SEAL Admiral, who had just begun to recover from the morning's events, noticed the black-clad team as well. He stood, shielding himself instinctively while trying to understand the situation. "Who are they?" he demanded, his voice firm but edged with concern. No one had received any prior orders about this team, and the sudden appearance of such a highly trained unit without communication was alarming. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether these newcomers were allies or threats. Before anyone could react further, the team moved with incredible efficiency, creating a clear path directly to the widow nurse. Their leader, a tall figure with a commanding presence, approached her calmly but with authority that brooked no refusal. It was clear they had come for her, and the clarity of their mission sent a chill through the onlookers. The nurse didn't hesitate. She understood immediately that this was not a situation to negotiate or question. These operatives operated under secret orders, and she had been prepared for this possibility for some time. As she prepared to move with them, whispers rippled through the base. Soldiers stared, some in awe, some in confusion, and some in frustration. They had just witnessed her save the SEAL Admiral, yet now this team of shadowy operatives was taking her away. Questions raced through everyone's minds. Why her? What secret had she been hiding? Was she in danger, or was she taking on another mission even more critical than the one she had just completed? Even the SEAL Admiral, despite his gratitude, felt a sense of helplessness. He had survived the morning's attack because of her, yet he could not stop her from being escorted away. The widow nurse moved calmly with the team, her composure unwavering. She had faced death and danger before, but this situation carried a different kind of tension. She wasn't under attack. She was under observation, under control, and yet her mind raced. She had known this day might come. Her past training, her assignments, and the secrets she carried had always meant that she might be extracted at a critical moment, regardless of personal attachments. She kept her focus, walking steadily alongside the operatives, aware of every soldier watching her, aware of the questions burning in their eyes. As they moved through the base, soldiers fell silent, some staring openly, others quickly averting their gaze out of respect or confusion. The widow nurse's calm and authority contrasted sharply with the shock and curiosity surrounding her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her actions, her demeanor, and her decision to comply quietly conveyed more than words could. Everyone watching realized that this was someone who had lived with secrets, trained for extraordinary circumstances, and had already risked everything to save lives. Now, she was moving on to another, equally dangerous task. The SEAL Admiral followed at a distance, struggling with a mix of gratitude and concern. "What is happening?" he asked one of his officers, but the reply was uncertain. Orders had come from a classified level, bypassing normal chains of command. The team's extraction was not just about her safety. It was about something much larger, something few could understand. It was a reminder that the widow nurse's life and skills were not ordinary. They were part of something hidden from even the most experienced military personnel. As the team led her toward a waiting vehicle, the base seemed to hold its breath. Fire still burned in some areas, The aftermath of the morning attack lingered, and yet the attention of everyone had shifted entirely to this mysterious extraction. Soldiers who had moments ago been focused on survival and recovery now watched a woman move with purpose, escorted by operatives whose presence signaled power and secrecy. The moment carried an almost surreal quality, as if time had slowed to emphasize the importance of what was happening. Inside the vehicle, the widow nurse took a deep breath, steadying herself for what lay ahead. She knew that her extraction was not a punishment or a reward. It was simply her mission continuing. The operatives were silent, professional, and completely focused. Outside, the SEAL Admiral watched as the vehicle disappeared over the horizon, leaving him with a mix of awe, gratitude, and unanswered questions. He realized that he had witnessed not only a heroic act of bravery earlier that morning but also the beginning of a story he might never fully understand. Back at the base, soldiers whispered and speculated, trying to piece together why she had been taken away. Some admired her even more. Others wondered if they had glimpsed the edge of a secret world beyond their comprehension. The widow nurse, meanwhile, was calm inside the vehicle, already preparing mentally for the challenges that awaited her. She had survived danger before, faced chaos head-on, and now she was moving into another unknown, another mission where her courage, skill, and resolve would be tested again. In that moment, the base understood one truth clearly. This was no ordinary nurse. She was a hero, a mystery, and a force that operated in the shadows, guided by experience, training, and an unwavering sense of duty. And as the vehicle carrying her sped away, everyone knew that this was only the beginning of a story far larger and far more extraordinary than any of them could imagine. The vehicle carrying the widow nurse moved swiftly through narrow, winding roads, cutting through rugged terrain far from the base she had just left. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. The operatives sat silently, their eyes scanning every possible threat through tinted windows, their hands close to their weapons. The widow nurse remained calm, her posture composed, but her mind was active, analyzing every movement, every sound. She had faced danger before, but this kind of extraction carried a different weight. She was no longer rescuing anyone. She was being rescued herself, or rather, secured. Outside, the landscape blurred past. Rocky hills, dense forests, and occasional abandoned villages. The sun was climbing higher, casting long shadows across the terrain, and the vehicle's engines hummed steadily over uneven ground. Every bump, every turn reminded her that she was in a situation where the stakes were incredibly high. She knew the world she was about to enter was secretive, hidden, and controlled by powers beyond ordinary military command. The knowledge didn't frighten her. It sharpened her focus. The SEAL Admiral, back at the base, was left staring after the dust cloud kicked up by the vehicle's departure. A mix of emotions coursed through him: awe at her bravery, gratitude for saving his life, and confusion over why she had been taken so suddenly. Orders came down the chain of command, but even the highest-ranking officers admitted they were in the dark. Her extraction was a classified operation, something beyond their control. The Admiral realized that, for all the missions he had led, he had never encountered someone whose life and skills were this tightly bound to secrets. Inside the vehicle, the widow nurse reflected briefly on the morning's chaos. The explosion, the pinned Admiral, and the rescue that had defined her courage. She had saved lives under extreme pressure, and now she was heading into a new chapter, one that demanded the same calm and precision. The operatives didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was a reminder that the mission ahead was critical, and their discipline created an unspoken boundary of professionalism and secrecy. As the journey continued, the widow nurse felt the tension in the air deepen. The operatives occasionally communicated using silent hand signals or brief whispers, each movement precise, each instruction carried out immediately. She understood that she was trusted to remain calm and focused, and that her role in the mission, whatever it might be, was crucial. Unlike earlier, when her actions saved lives in visible chaos, this was a mission that demanded discretion, patience, and unwavering composure. Hours passed, the vehicle moving farther and farther from the base. Inside, The widow nurse noticed subtle cues, the way the operatives checked their surroundings, how they coordinated their movements, and how the vehicle seemed to follow a predetermined route designed to avoid detection. Every small detail reinforced her understanding. This was no ordinary mission, and she was no ordinary nurse. She had been trained, perhaps even groomed, for moments like this, where skill, courage, and discretion intersected at the highest levels. During brief stops, the operatives moved with quiet efficiency, securing the area, checking communications, and scanning the terrain. The widow nurse remained alert, observing and absorbing everything without drawing attention to herself. Her training had taught her that awareness was survival, and even though she had been extracted for her safety, she knew that vigilance was still essential. One wrong move or a lapse in attention could jeopardize not only her mission but also the safety of those responsible for her. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was almost surreal. The widow nurse felt a strange mix of isolation and purpose. She had been recognized for her extraordinary skill, yet that recognition came at the cost of secrecy. She was being taken away from the people who relied on her, from the base she had helped save, and yet she accepted it without complaint. Her focus was forward, toward the unknown destination and the unknown task awaiting her. There was no room for fear, only preparation and readiness. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting the sky in shades of orange and red, the vehicle slowed near a hidden location. Tall walls, reinforced gates, and armed guards hinted at the scale of the operation awaiting her. She realized she was entering a place far beyond standard military installations. A Blacksite, a world designed for secrecy, strategy, and missions the public would never know about. The tension inside the vehicle heightened. This was not just a change of location. It was a threshold into a life where ordinary rules didn't apply. The operatives communicated silently with each other, and the widow nurse followed their guidance without hesitation. They had been briefed on her abilities, her training, and her composure, and she had been selected precisely because she could operate under extreme pressure. Her calm demeanor and sharp mind were exactly what this next mission demanded. As the gates opened and the vehicle rolled into the compound, she understood that her life had entered a new phase, one where courage, skill, and secrecy would define every decision she made. The SEAL Admiral, still back at the base, could only watch as reports trickled in, sparse and vague, hinting at her safe arrival but revealing nothing of her next steps. He felt a mix of relief and lingering curiosity. She had saved his life, inspired everyone at the base, and yet she now belonged to a world he could never access. The realization was humbling. Heroes often operate in the shadows, unseen, yet their actions ripple across lives in ways few can imagine. Inside the Blacksite, the widow nurse stepped out of the vehicle, calm and composed, ready for whatever awaited her. She had survived combat, chaos, and danger, and now she was entering a world of secrecy and strategy. Her focus remained unwavering, her skills intact, and her determination clear. No matter what came next, she would face it with the same courage that had defined her morning. Days passed after the widow nurse had been taken away, and back at the base, the SEAL Admiral could not stop thinking about her. He replayed the morning of the attack in his mind over and over, the chaos, the explosions, the moment she had pulled him from the rubble with calm precision. Her bravery had been extraordinary, but now, after her sudden extraction, questions haunted him. Who was she really? How had she moved with such skill and confidence in the middle of total chaos? And why had she been taken so quickly by a team nobody at the base had any knowledge of? The answers came slowly, in pieces, through classified channels. One day, a secure communication reached the Admiral. It was brief and almost deliberately vague, but it contained information that would change his understanding of the nurse completely. She had not been a regular nurse, he learned. Her recent widow status and deployment were only part of a carefully maintained cover story. Beneath it, she had been trained for years in a covert medical and tactical program, one designed to prepare individuals for extreme combat and high-stakes operations. Her skills in emergency medicine were enhanced with advanced combat training, survival techniques, and specialized extraction protocols. She was, in essence, a soldier and medic combined, operating at a level far beyond what the base had realized. The Admiral sat back in his chair, stunned. Every detail of that morning made new sense. How she had moved through falling debris, how she had assessed his injuries with such speed and precision, how she had coordinated the rescue under impossible pressure. It was all the result of years of intense, specialized training. She had not acted on instinct alone. She had acted with skill honed for moments exactly like this. Her calm demeanor, which had impressed and puzzled everyone at the base, was part of a design, a quality deliberately developed in her training. Even more astonishing was the realization that her extraction by the Blacksite team was not random. It had been planned, and she had been ready for it. Her life had always balanced on the edge of secrecy, and while she had risked everything to save lives at the base, she had done so with the understanding that such actions were only part of her broader mission. The Admiral began to see that the widow nurse was more than a medic, more than a hero of the battlefield. She was an operative whose life and work existed in a world hidden from most, even from those with the highest ranks in conventional military operations. He remembered the moment she had moved through the chaos, guiding other soldiers, treating the wounded, and keeping her focus entirely on saving lives. Every instinct he had about her skill, bravery, and composure was now validated by the revelation of her true background. The Admiral could not help but feel awe. This woman, whom he had initially thought of as a newly deployed nurse, was someone whose entire life had been trained for extraordinary circumstances. Her presence at the base had been no accident. She had been positioned there exactly when and where her abilities were most needed. The information also revealed something more personal about her character. She had endured loss, having lost her husband in combat. Yet she had channeled her grief into service, turning personal tragedy into extraordinary courage. Her actions were not just the result of training. They were also the result of resilience, determination, and a profound sense of duty. The Admiral understood in that moment that heroism could take many forms, and that sometimes the most extraordinary individuals were those who operated quietly, efficiently, and without recognition. Reports continued to trickle in, describing her subsequent assignments and missions. Each revealed her effectiveness in scenarios that were far beyond conventional operations, high-risk extractions, covert medical interventions, and tactical operations where the line between life and death was razor-thin. Every mission had been executed with the same calm, precision, and efficiency that he had witnessed firsthand. It became clear that the widow nurse had saved countless lives before even arriving at this base, and that her rescue of the Admiral was one example among many of her extraordinary capabilities. The Admiral reflected on the implications of what he had learned. He had spent decades in the military, facing some of the most dangerous and complex operations imaginable. Yet this woman had managed to surprise him completely. He realized that courage, skill, and heroism were not always visible, and that the most remarkable people often worked in the shadows, carrying burdens and responsibilities that most would never understand. She had saved him, inspired the soldiers, and yet remained largely unknown outside the classified world she belonged to. Though he could not communicate with her directly due to the secrecy surrounding her operations, the Admiral felt a deep respect and gratitude. He knew that she had chosen, every step of the way, to put others before herself, to act decisively under extreme pressure, and to navigate a world that demanded secrecy and skill in equal measure. He realized that her life was not defined by recognition or reward, but by the lives she saved and the missions she completed with unwavering courage. In the days that followed, he carried the lesson with him. Heroism could be hidden, extraordinary skill could be masked by ordinary appearances, and sometimes the most courageous acts were performed in silence, unseen by the world. The widow nurse had proven all of these truths in a single harrowing morning. Her actions had not only saved his life, but had also revealed a profound truth about courage, resilience, and dedication to duty. She was, without question, one of the most remarkable people he had ever encountered. And though the world outside would never know her story in full, the Admiral understood that the widow nurse's legacy was not in recognition or fame. It was in every life she had touched, every mission she had completed, and every act of bravery she had carried out in the shadows. Her true identity, her extraordinary training, and her unwavering courage would remain secret. Yet the impact of her actions would resonate far beyond the confines of the classified operations she served. widow nurse's story didn't end with the extraction or even with the revelation of her extraordinary background. In the quiet, secretive world she now operated in, every day was a challenge, every mission a test of skill, courage, and composure. Yet, even as she moved through this hidden life, the memory of the morning she had saved the SEAL Admiral remained vivid. It was a moment that defined her, not just as a trained operative, but as someone who chose to act selflessly when lives hung in the balance. Back at the base, the SEAL Admiral continued to process the events of that day. Though he was now safe, he couldn't shake the image of her moving through the chaos with calm precision, pulling him free from under the rubble, and treating the wounded as if nothing else in the world existed. Every detail replayed in his mind, the way she assessed injuries in an instant, the way she commanded respect without raising her voice, and the quiet confidence that inspired others to follow her lead. He realized that her heroism went far beyond any act he had witnessed before. The Admiral also reflected on the secrecy surrounding her extraction. He understood now that her life was one of duality. Publicly, she was a nurse, recently deployed, a widow navigating personal grief. Privately, she was part of a world where extraordinary skill, classified missions, and covert operations defined every action. Her bravery at the base was only a glimpse of the life she led, a life in which every moment demanded discipline, courage, and an unyielding sense of duty. Even the Admiral, a man with decades of military experience, felt humbled by the magnitude of her abilities and the quiet strength she carried. Meanwhile, the widow nurse had settled into the rhythm of the Blacksite operations. Her missions were challenging, requiring medical expertise, tactical precision, and a calm mind under pressure. Each task was more complex than the last, but she approached them with the same determination she had displayed at the base. Her training and experience allowed her to anticipate danger, respond instantly, and maintain control in situations where most would panic. She had become a master of her craft, and yet she remained grounded, never letting recognition or ego dictate her actions. Though her world was secretive and few knew her true identity, her impact was undeniable. Soldiers and operatives who worked with her knew they could rely on her in moments of extreme danger. Lives were saved because of her presence, though most would never understand how or why. Her skill, courage, and calm were her legacy, a legacy carried out in silence, far from the public eye. The SEAL Admiral, from afar, continued to follow what little information he could access about her missions. Even in a world filled with danger and secrecy, her reputation preceded her. Each successful operation confirmed what he had already realized. She was extraordinary. He often reflected on the idea that true heroism was not always about recognition, medals, or public acclaim. It was about action, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown for the sake of others. The widow nurse embodied all of these qualities. Despite the secrecy of her life, she carried her past experiences and personal losses as a source of strength. Losing her husband had been devastating, yet she had transformed grief into resilience. She had taken personal tragedy and turned it into a driving force, channeling her pain into action that saved countless lives. Every decision she made, every life she touched, was infused with purpose and compassion. She had learned that courage was not about the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it, and she applied this lesson every day in her covert missions. Even within the Blacksite, where rules were strict and missions were dangerous, she remained a source of inspiration. Her composure and skill elevated those around her, setting a standard that others aspired to reach. She led by example, demonstrating that strength was not measured by rank or recognition, but by the consistent choice to act with courage and integrity, no matter the circumstances. Those who worked alongside her understood that she was not just a medic or an operative. She was a leader in every sense of the word, even when her leadership went unnoticed by the world at large. The widow nurse's life became a testament to the idea that heroism can exist in silence. She did not seek acknowledgement, nor did she expect gratitude. Her satisfaction came from knowing that her actions saved lives, protected others, and made a difference, even if the world never knew her name. Her courage and skill became the hidden backbone of operations, supporting missions that were vital to safety, security, and success. In the end, the SEAL Admiral often thought about the lessons she had left behind. She had taught him that extraordinary people often walk among us unnoticed, that bravery is not always loud or celebrated, and that the impact of one individual's courage can ripple across many lives. Her actions at the base, and in the secret world she inhabited, were a reminder that true heroism exists both in the visible and invisible moments. Moments that shape destinies, save lives, and inspire others to rise above fear and doubt. Though her story remained largely hidden from the public, the legacy of the widow nurse endured. She had shown that courage, skill, and selflessness were not defined by recognition or rank, but by the choices one made when faced with life-and-death situations. She had saved the SEAL Admiral, inspired soldiers at the base, and continued to impact countless lives through her covert work. Her life, a blend of heroism, sacrifice, and resilience, remained a shining example of what it truly meant to serve with honor, courage, and unwavering commitment. And in the quiet moments, far from the chaos of missions and danger, she carried on calm, focused, and resolute, ever ready for the next challenge, the next life to save, the next mission that would demand everything she had. Her story, though largely unseen, left an indelible mark on all who had witnessed her bravery, reminding the world that true heroes often walk in the shadows, acting not for fame, but for the lives and safety of others.